Hello and welcome back to the Fight and Talk 2 channel. We are the Fight and Talk 2 team. As you can see, we've got George at the bottom in his Fight and Talk 2 t-shirt. How are we doing, casual corner, George?
Beautiful. What a beautiful day it's been down here in the old Dorset countryside.
Beautiful, man. Even in central London, it's been hay fevery as hell, but it has been glorious. Prath, how are we doing, my friend? You're only 3 miles away from me. Has it been as sunny over there as it been here?
Yeah, man, 24 degrees today. It's been pretty damn hot. My flat is insanely hot. I had to get out, get into some shade, which is crazy to say, but it's been a beautiful day. So loving summer. Let's hope it doesn't rain.
Yeah, loving life. It probably will rain at some point because in the UK, when it's sun, there's plenty of rain to follow. But
yes,
this weekend, fingers crossed, it will be sun all evening for this card. Wow. From top to bottom, UFC 263 is banger after banger after banger. On paper, this should be the card of the decade contender. Obviously, we had some fantastic main pay-per-view events in the past couple of months, but this looks really, really good. It really does. The rematch of Israel Adesanya versus Marvin Vettori, which we're going to get to, Figueiredo versus Moreno, which I thought was a fantastic fight the first time around. We've got Eric Anders versus Darren Stewart again. Paul Craig's making his return after a fantastic win. I'm looking down at the notes here, and it's just banger after banger. And how can we not forget Leon Rocky Edwards coming in against the number 17 in the world, Nate Diaz. I don't know why this is a thing, but, you know, they're obviously...
How did you find that out?
I think like Skerdog, he's like, you know, it tells you where they are in the world.
I love that fight, man.
Wow. I might just be guessing. I don't know, but he's he's not ranked 15. He's not inside the 15. So it's like, why is he fighting Leon Rocky Edwards, who should be fighting for a title shot next? I just don't understand. But yeah, of course, we know it's the money. We know it's the money. But nevertheless, we are going to start from the prelims.
Ain't the money.
Why is it not the money? I'm sure he's getting paid good for this. 5 rounds.
Fair play to Nate Diaz, man. He could have taken any fight he wanted to at his age. He could have got any fight he wanted, but he chose Leon Edwards. He wants a title shot. That's why he's picked this fight. He's getting paid because that's what Nate Diaz does, but he could have had any fight he wanted to. But no, he picked Leon Edwards out of everyone. The worst guy possible, really, just because he wants a title shot that badly. That's what I think, anyway. I think he's living up to his name. He's a proper gangster.
We'll have to wait and see. And someone who's not a gangster yet in his career, and he's fighting on the prelims, Chase Hooper. How this kid is still alive, I will not know. I do not know. The fights he's been in, and the kid's got no stand-up. You know, I'm sure we can all agree he's got zero stand-up, and he is the size of a twig. But somehow this kid keeps getting the W's. Prath, what do you think is going to happen in this fight? Do you think he's going to take a loss here, or do you think he's going to continue on this winning streak that he has?
You know, he's super young, he's super green. So, you know, I think obviously very expected to kind of rely on your skill set that you've developed from your teen years in. That's kind of what you saw with Sage Northcutt, just able to kind of parlay his karate skills, have a little bit of a takedown offense, and then, you know, he can kind of get what he wants out of those fights and, you know, match him up quite well against other people. The other thing you don't see here is Steven Peterson won his last fight by spinning back fist knockout. Do I rate Chase Hooper's chances on the feet? Probably not. But I think if he's able to get Steven Peterson down, then he can implement his game, you know, as best as he can. You know, I think it's going to be tough to try and get someone down who's a bit more of a veteran. Steven Peterson's had a lot of fights. I know he's fought in like LFA and all this kind of stuff. You know, his record is 18-9, so he's had a hell of a lot of fights. And, you know, I believe Chase has had like maybe 11 to 12 fights. So, you know, he's getting in there with a real veteran of the game. So I'm hoping that he's able to kind of implement his style. Maybe come out with a submission win, or maybe grind him out to a decision. But if it stays on the feet, I anticipate Steven Peterson being able to knock young Chase Hooper out.
You know, obviously Chase Hooper is very, very young. I think he's like one of the youngest people, if not the youngest person in the organization. But if he was to take a couple of consecutive losses here, he will inevitably get dropped, right? And then where does he go from here? You know, he's on the biggest stage in the world. We've had this conversation before on this show. You're on the biggest stage in the world. You take a couple of losses. Where do you go? You go to Bellator and then you make your way back. When he's like 25, 26, he's had a few fights. But what do you think?
Look at Sage. Sage was able to go to ONE FC, have a couple of fights. I know he didn't particularly. I know he got one where he kind of got killed a little bit. But they matched him up against like an absolute savage. So it was kind of expected to happen. But you know, those Japanese organizations eat up young talent. They love being able to show that they're a young talent across the world. They want to match them up against their talent and things like that. So, you know, sky's the limit for someone like Chase Hooper, who's still in his early half of his 20s. You know, you don't really reach your prime per se until you're like later 20s into your 30s. So he's still got a ways to go still, but you know, he's gotten in at a good time and you know, he's on the biggest platform available for someone of his age as well. So, you know, it's only going to give him more confidence, more perspective on the situation as well. He knows the difference between fighting in the UFC and fighting at ONE, fighting at Bellator, and what that means and what it means in the, you know, in the world and, you know, in that kind of thing. So I think if he loses, he'll probably make a smart decision to go to somewhere that will benefit him the most, you know, or try and make as much money as possible. Maybe he goes to BKFC and does what apparently the majority of these people are doing for some reason.
Yeah, or he fights a YouTuber. The only thing I think, is if you are on the top platform in the world, you know, you're in the UFC and you go to you sidestep and you go to a different organization, are they going to treat you differently because you've come from the UFC? As we saw with Sage Northcutt, it was like, yeah, look, he's come from the UFC. Let's match him up with a killer. You know, if you were sparring in the gym and a guy come in and went, yeah, I was in the UFC, you'd match him up with the biggest, hardest person in the gym purely because he's come in with that kind of that name behind him. Although he may have just been fighting on the prelims and lost his first 3 fights and got cut. But nevertheless, you were still in the UFC.
I think a lot of these promotions really rate having an ex-UFC fighter in their organization. Another example from ONE Championship, you know, because I think they gathered the best people they potentially could get from the UFC when they cut, you know, DJ and Eddie Alvarez, I think are great representations of American culture in Asia. And so I think with that in mind, they were able to market these guys very, very well. Same with Sage Northcutt. They were able to market it very, very well to that audience as look at this, you know, like, you know, I hate to say it, but, you know, the great American white hope kind of thing. You look at him and he looks like Ivan Drago. And I think that they kind of see him as like a perfect looking human being. And that's the way that they kind of marketed him. And that's what, you know, the Asian market seems to love. So look at these, you know, the Korean boy bands and Japanese boy bands and things like that. They like someone that's like perfect looking. And I think when you look at Sage Northcutt for his age and who he is, he's kind of embodies that in some respects. So I think it depends where you go, but I think they rate these guys very, very highly. ONE FC had Arjun Singh Bhullar just fight for their heavyweight championship. And, you know, he didn't fight on the main event of a UFC card. He didn't fight. I don't even think he fought in the headline of a prelim of a UFC card. So for him to then go over to ONE FC and get a championship title fight, I don't think he had many fights between getting cut from the UFC and fighting in this organization. So I think that they really rate these guys, put them on a pedestal. I think Bellator treated a lot of these guys wonderfully as well. Like look at Rory McDonald, Gegard Mousasi, Corey Anderson. These are all guys that talk very highly of what Bellator have done for them post UFC, and they could have just been cast to the side. Especially someone like Corey Anderson, for his fighting style. Not to say he's not a great fighter or anything like that, but his fighting style is often one that is usually like a forgettable style. So for him to go over to Bellator and be treated as well as he has and earn more money than he's earned in the UFC is fantastic. So I think, you know, it's not something that it sucks, I think, for most of these guys because they do realize the level of platform that they're able to get with the UFC. But if they're able to make more money at the end of the day, I think look at Eddie Alvarez, right? What else he got to prove in the UFC by taking a pay cut and staying in the UFC when he can make as much money as possible? He's fought in Bellator, he's fought in, you know, Japan, he's fought in all of these different organizations, and he can continue to make more money being in these other organizations than being in the UFC.
Yeah,
That was a really long-winded answer, but I think I explained it pretty well.
But even Francis Ngannou at the weekend, we're going to go a little bit off topic here, but Francis Ngannou at the weekend, obviously you saw his tweet that was saying like, what do I have to do? Fight a YouTuber to make some money? Or like, what's the deal now? George, you obviously hate this fight circus thing that goes on, right? But, what did you take away from what Francis Ngannou said? Because the man is at the top of the world right now. He's the heavyweight champion of the world. He can pretty much say, Dana White, write me a blank check and I'll put in the numbers, my friend, and I'll see you at cage side. But what do you take away from this? And obviously Jake Paul at the weekend was promoting the fact that fighters and all athletes need to get paid a fair percentage of the organization.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally the only thing that Jake Paul has said that's actually sensible. That was actually a completely valid kind of point he actually made. If only he'd speak a bit more often, it would be, he might actually be a more pleasant character to have to sit and watch all the time. But yeah, it's difficult, I think, for the UFC or for Dana White, because Dana White's always like this strong head person. That's like, and I think the best example is actually being of Paulo Costa this week, where he's kind of like he's come out and said that he's not going to fight because he's not getting paid enough to fight Jared Cannonier, and I think Dana White responded today saying, well, you signed a contract, so fuck you, what do you want me to do? Like, you signed it, deal with it, basically. I suppose if that is the case with all of these fighters, then, that will be Dana White's argument across the board. But there's difficult scenarios, though, like Francis Ngannou and the John Jones thing, where, fights present themselves, and to make it happen, like, rightfully, these both fighters deserve to be paid above maybe what they're getting paid in their contract. So if Ngannou's getting $3 million for a fight, and he thinks he deserves more like 10, then who are we to argue and say that's not the case, when actually we all know that pay-per-view money and all this kind of stuff is going to easily outweigh what the fighters are asking for. It's difficult though, and it will become more difficult for the UFC and for Dana White when people like Jake Paul are constantly going, well, look, I'm getting paid $10-20 million to do this, and you're not paying your fighters properly. People will start to jump on that, and they will start going to Dana White and and Hunter Campbell, the lawyer of the UFC, and start saying, well, come on, I want new contracts here, I want more money. It's definitely a bit of a storm in a teacup kind of thing, and at the moment, but it could definitely become quite a big problem for the UFC going forwards.
One thing I just want to mention is look at Tyron Woodley now. Tyron Woodley is left the UFC, probably most definitely earned in one fight more money than he's earned in one fight in the UFC, and he's taken the easiest fight he can possibly take, which is Jake Paul. And he's about to get paid more than he did for a single fight in the UFC.
I agree, but there's two ways of
collectively.
Yeah, there's two ways of looking at this, right? It's like, I know it sounds bad, but it's like it's not a stay in your lane thing, but it's like a look after yourself and focus on your own thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, they can all look at Jake Paul, Logan Paul, and say like, why are you making loads of money? And it's like, they've built a brand. As much as we dislike these two brothers collectively, they have built a brand, and their brand brings in viewers, and their brand brings in numbers. And, they are YouTubers that are now having boxing fights, and they're just, they're performing for their own YouTube channels. That is it. They're not boxing for professional records or to go and chase the WBC belt or, whatever. They're just having some fights for fun, and they're getting paid loads and loads of money for it because they're the ones organizing it. The one of the weekend was on like Showtime, but it was Mayweather Money Productions, and it was, Jake Paul had Logan Paul had loads of investment in it. And it was like they're funding it themselves, so they are reaping the rewards. They are their own, their own investments, which I appreciate. And if you sign a contract saying that you're going to fight for $3 million, you're going to fight for $3 million. That's down to you. If you sign the contract and then you look at someone else and go, oh well, why did they make 20 mil? You shouldn't have signed the contract then. That's down to you. That's your decision. You are your own individual.
I think the only one that makes a difference is the champions. I think the champions are able, maybe, they have to be able to look at how much money they make on pay-per-view. But someone like Francis Ngannou versus John Jones, right? Look at that for a fight, for example.
Yeah.
That will sell millions of pay-per-views. So I don't understand why they wouldn't want to give them, even a little bit of that to make the fight happen. Then the UFC makes an absolute load of money on the other end, and they can benefit from, we pay for a BT subscription to be able to watch the UFC, and often when John Jones is fighting or Conor McGregor's fighting or Khabib is fighting, we have to pay a little bit more extra to watch them. Like if the UFC do this in every country, they're going to make their money back tenfold because everyone wants to see Francis Ngannou versus John Jones. So it makes very little sense to me.
These fighters are contractors. They are individual contractors. They don't work for the organization. So the UFC front the money for the app. They front the money to be on all of the TV stations. They have the PIs that they're setting up all around the world. And these fighters are essentially just showing up, doing their 15 minutes and leaving again. You know what I mean? It's not like having a permanent job where, like when we were talking about WWE and stuff, and they might be in like a 10-year contract or a 15-year contract for X amount of money a year, then fair enough. You are contractually binded to work for that length of time. Whereas they don't have to be in the UFC. They've signed contracts. They can, if they don't want to fight, if they don't want to sign a three fight contract, the 3-fight deal, they don't have to. They could do one at a time. If you don't want to fight for less than 10 mil, don't fight.
I know the UFC do tie them up in like 7-fight contracts, though. They wouldn't because that's the smart thing for Dana to do.
Yeah, of course, because he's a businessman, and at the end of the day, the UFC is a business, and they're a forever expanding business as well. The amount of things that are under their umbrella is phenomenal. The things that they own as a collective group. But back to the weekend, because we have digressed a little bit, and this card is huge enough, and we don't need to fill this episode with other topics. But when we're looking for topics, when there isn't a fight card on, we're looking around going, well, what are we going to talk about? Clearly, we should just press record and see what happens. There's a couple of other fights on the prelims. There's Frank Camacho versus Matt Fravola. Sorry, George. Anything on this one?
Yeah, man, Matt Fravola. I think wasn't he the guy that was due to fight old Mr. Potato Otman Azatar back in January?
Mm-hmm.
I was booked to fight him, and then he took that last minute fight with you're gonna have to help me out with this one, Praf. Arman Tasukian, the Armenian fella.
Close. Arman Sarukian.
Sarukian, there you go. Close, almost. So yeah, and obviously he obviously lost that, but kind of had that as a last minute kind of replacement. Yeah, I think this is a great fight for Matt Fravola to try and get himself back on track. It was a bit of a, he's had a kind of few things. I think he had a really difficult 12 months. I think he had COVID quite badly, and then he had injuries, and then he had the fight school off. I think it's been a bit of a difficult one for Matt Fravola, but I think old Steamroller, as he likes to call himself, has got a chance here to come and get himself back on track at the weekend. So I'm looking forward to seeing Matt Fravola, but he's had a couple of tough kind of like fights booked, and this one seems maybe a bit more steady for him, should we say?
Yeah, fingers crossed they can put it together. And then George, you obviously are a big fan of the Russian, Dagestani, Georgian kind of vibe that's been coming over the past kind of like 6 months to a year. And we've got Movsar Evloev fighting Hakeem Dawodu. I know, George, you're pretty hyped up on both of these gentlemen, right?
Yeah, I definitely am. And actually, old Hakeem Dawodu was actually going to be in Cross this week. So that's worked out quite nicely. So, Hakeem Dawodu just comes to have a brawl, basically. And that's what's so great about him. And him opening up the kind of prelims is the perfect fight at 1 a.m. to start this whole thing off, really. Evloev is a bit more of he's a bit more tactical about it. He's a bit more, kind of thoughtful. Yeah, Dawodu ain't like that. He's just coming to have a brawl. I mean, you guys might remember when he fought Tahugov, Khabib's training partner, and he's standing there in the middle of the octagon screaming at him like, let's fucking fight. So, he's proper. So, I'm looking forward to seeing him. And, he's found himself in crush corner this week because whenever he comes out, he's just looking for a bit of a brawl. And I'm quite into that, to be fair.
Yeah, love a brawl. We love a brawl on this show. As long as it's entertaining, and try and get it done within the distance, and don't leave it to the absolutely horrifically visioned judges that we have.
He's like a very, very angry featherweight, and like he's like I've never seen him
so
happy.
angry.
He looks so angry all the time, and I suppose that's why he's called Mean Hakeem, because he literally is just the most angry human being. But it's perfect though; it's what you need at 1 o'clock to start the prelims.
Absolutely. Do you think he's got SMS or?
I don't know, mate.
No.
That's what SMS is.
Small man syndrome.
Oh,
sorry.
I literally
I thought
clocked
he
it.
was real serious. Maybe he has got small man syndrome. Perhaps he has. Maybe someone posed that question to him during interviews this week.
Yeah.
See how mad he
And then the next one we're going to talk about, Prath, Lauren Murphy versus Joanne Calderwood. I know you love both of these women you've spoken about before on this show. Tell me, how do you think this is going to play out? And both of these women are going to be chasing up this ladder, right? Very, very shortly.
So for me, this probably is the title eliminator for the next shot of Valentina. I forget who's actually fighting Valentina next. Is she fighting someone next?
I don't think
she hasn't been booked. So
he's waiting on the fight apparently.
So this is the fight that kind of brings her next victim. Shout out to Joanne Calderwood representing Scotland in Las Vegas. I know she trains out of Las Vegas now. She's married to or engaged to or dating one of the head coaches over Extreme Couture. I know the one that you normally see in what's his name? Francis Ngannou's corner. Yeah, both incredible fighters right at the top of the flyweight division. Lucky Lauren Murphy used to be a bantamweight fighter. Now she's dropping down to flyweight. She seems perfect at that weight class, and she's had a few gritty wins. She won by rear naked choke in her last fight against Lilia Shakirova, which is a hell of a name as well. Yeah. And then, but this is, that's just one fight of 4 that she's won in a row. Couple of decisions and a TKO in that as well. So those are the kind of fights that you want to see in your title challenges. The ones that are getting TKO wins, submission wins, finishes. That's what the fans want to see. So awesome to see lucky Lauren Murphy going up against Joanne Calderwood. I absolutely love her style. She's got a really nice Muay Thai style, very amazing in the clinch. She's always got great elbows, great knee. She's had a bit, I will say this, she's had a bit of an up and down career inside of the UFC so far. She was obviously on the Ultimate Fighter, and she did pretty good on the Ultimate Fighter, if from what I can remember. Since she's been in the UFC, I think she's had a lot of problems outside of the octagon that have precluded her from being the best version of herself inside the octagon. And in her last 4 fights, she's won 2 and lost 2. So I think if she's able to get on a bit of a winning streak here, this is something that's appealing for the champion. I think it's pretty much a no-brainer that if lucky Lauren Murphy wins, then she's definitely going to be winning. She's been gunning for that title shot. Little bit of a trickier sell with Joanne Calderwood because of the record, the win-loss. I think just generally speaking, if you look at someone like Dana White, he wants someone that's had a couple of wins. I mean, I say that, but he's put Yoel Romero off a loss in there. So it's hard to say that he wouldn't do that. But I mean, I think if Valentina wanted to fight Joanne, I think Valentina would get Joanne.
I was just going
to say that. Yeah, well, I think Lauren's obviously the easier sell if she wins. But Joanne's going to be a bit of a trickier one. But I think if Valentina wants to fight Joanne, she'll fight Joanne.
Yeah.
Also, this is a nice learning lesson for Joanne Calderwood. She didn't have to take that fight with Jennifer Meyer. She would have got the title shot back then if she hadn't taken that fight. She lost that. Then she fought Jessica I and beat her. Yeah. She had to go through some pretty hefty fights. And I think she might come up short. I think she's going to come up short this weekend against Lauren Murphy.
I think it's going to be close. I think whatever it happens, it's going to go to decision.
Lauren Murphy's really hitting her stride in these last couple of fights as well. And she's really upped the aggression inside the octagon, which is great to see. And I think she will be chasing that finish because and again, I hate to say that because I hate to say this because I love the British fighters, but she seems like a very finishable kind of gal. And so I think one of those kind of things where Lauren Murphy would be looking to pressure, take down, ground and pound, and secure a win by TKO.
Are you saying Joanne Calderwood isn't a finisher?
I am. I'm saying she's easy to get finished, unlike Conor McGregor.
Disgusting behaviour. Well, a fight that we hope does finish inside the distance, but not the way that it finished last time, obviously with an illegal knee. Eric Anders versus Darren Stewart is the next one we're going to talk about. This was a bit of a strange matchup last time. I thought Eric Anders looked about 5 times the size of Darren Stewart. And then we obviously heard this week that Darren Stewart's going back up to 205 because he doesn't like the weight cuts. Fair enough, if that's what he wants to do. But 205 is a very, very big division and a very, very difficult division to be in. Do you know what I mean? We've got some absolute murderers up there at the 205. I think it's a we always talk about different divisions and where we'd put them, and should we get a 165 and stuff like that. I think when you're putting 20 pound on, that's a big number. When you're going from 205 to heavyweight, and you're thinking you're going to be putting 40 pound on at least to be a moderately okay heavyweight. Going from 185 to 205 is a big leap for Darren Stewart, who's obviously a UK fighter, so we got to back our boy. But I feel like he's just one of these fighters that is just, I don't know why he's there. And obviously when we see interviews with him, he's there for the bread. He's there for the bread. He wants to make bread. I think he should have become a baker because he's not making bread in an octagon, right? He speaks about bread a lot.
You were just talking about him going up to 205, and I just wanted to, because I always picture him to be a rather smaller fighter.
Yeah.
And I just checked out. I was like, oh, let me think of someone who's like relatively tall in the light heavyweight division. And I went to Johnny Walker, who's probably the tallest person in the light heavyweight division. Okay. He's 6'6". He's 6'6", and Darren Stewart is 5'11".
Darren Stewart's 5'11". I thought he was at least 6 foot.
Yeah. There you go.
Wow. But I suppose, obviously DC had a very good run at light heavyweight and at heavyweight, and he's 5'10" or 5'9".
But he was a great wrestler.
Exactly. I'm not comparing. No way was I comparing the two. I'm just saying, if we're talking about height.
You're saying that Darren Stewart's not a finisher.
Go on, George. What were you saying, mate?
I was just going to say there's a slight difference between DC and Darren Stewart. That was what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But it's very hard, like you say, it's really hard. The 185 to 205 jump is a really hard one to get right. It takes time, and I think it's take a lot of thought process. And so just the kind of like, it feels like he's just decided this like on the whim almost. We had no idea what was happening, and suddenly he's going to 205. I don't quite know like where or how long that takes Darren Stewart to get to hit like to the best 205 he can be. It's a really hard jump to make. It's probably the most difficult one in the sport, to be honest.
Definitely. And I feel like, obviously these guys are going in and they're doing their 8-12 week camp or whatever it may be. And then they're spending the last 7 to 10 days cutting weight or 5 to 7 days cutting weight. And if you're fighting at 205, you're walking around at 220, 225 minimum. That's kind of where you'd be walking around. You'd be cutting 20 pound at least. So if you're fighting at 185, you're going to be walking around at 205 essentially. And it's like, I really don't know where he's going to put this weight onto his frame, whether it will make him slower than he is. He's not really got a very good wrestling background. He obviously called Darren the dentist, but he probably knocked some teeth out when he was like 12, and then that's just been his nickname. It's more like the dentist that will put you to sleep. He should be Darren the anaesthetist, Stewart, but I don't think that's got the same ring to it.
And you're implying that he finishes fights when we've just established that he doesn't.
No, he puts the crowd to sleep.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, because the dentist would just knock some out. The anaesthetist would just come, just put the whole place to sleep, man. Put the whole place to sleep. Or we could call him Darren Counting Sheep Stewart. What about that?
Oh, brutal.
I'm sorry.
Support our fellow Englishmen, guys.
Support him making that bread. Support him making that bread.
I want to try it. I'm a big fan of bread. If you've got anything going, Darren Stewart, please send it our way.
I've got a sourdough starter called Susan in my fridge. If you want to borrow some of it, it would take her probably about 3 days to liven up, and she'll be great for making sourdough, man.
Oh my
God. How long it takes. Yes. That's how long it takes him to warm up in an actual fight. About 3 days.
Oh.
Brutal. But George, what do you think is going to happen in this fight? Because I feel like Darren Stewart was getting pretty rocked in the first fight, and he was taking quite a lot of damage. I feel like the fight was close to be. It was about to be ended anyway, and then obviously the illegal knee. Personally, I feel like it saved him, but obviously Darren Stewart came out afterwards and said, "People that know me, I make bread. People that know me." I would never get out of a fight like that. I make bread. People that know me. He repeats himself a lot, and it's very frustrating. But George, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I feel like I'm slaughtering all the British people so far. Maybe I'm saving it all for Rocky Edwards later on, But
sacrifices are necessary.
Yeah, I think this might have to be a sacrifice. I think Eric Anders probably gets this done. To be honest, I think this kind of goes similar kind of way to the first one. If I'm being honest, I quite like Eric Anders as well. I think his record doesn't reflect him as a mixed martial artist. I think he's like 12-5 or 12-6 or something like that. He's a bit like we were saying last week about Walt Harris. You just view him as a better fighter than maybe the record suggests. And he also comes from a really great camp as well. I know he does a lot of training with the Korean. It's a bit weird because of the weight difference. But he does a lot of training with Korean Zombie, and I mean, if you bring a little edge of Korean Zombie into your fights, then yeah, that's gonna be pretty entertaining.
No, yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed it is, and fingers crossed we can get through a paper card without any kind of freak incidents of leg breaking, knee to the heads, kind of, fingers crossed we can make it through one whole card without 48 groin strikes and a knee poke.
And just fingers crossed that Darren Stewart actually comes out there for the 15 minutes and just gives it a right good go. Whether you lose or win, just come out and just give it your best effort. Because there's been times where you've looked at it like, I know it's taking the mick, but there's been times where you've gone, yeah, I'll skip this one. Like, it's been like that sometimes. It's like, it'd be quite nice if in the first few minutes you're just like, whoa, Darren Stewart, he's really on it tonight. He's giving it the big massive, but I won't hold my breath on it.
I'd be happy to donate some bread if you can do that, please.
Yeah, I'll donate loads of loaves.
Yeah, I mean, I know he's been doing some extra work with a friend of mine that is got a taekwondo background. He's been working on his kicks a lot, and he's kind of like kicks, spinny kind of kicks and special stuff. And he goes to the same cryo unit that I go to for treatment, and he gets treatment from Paul from Back to Basics. But we'll have to wait and see. What?
I'm waiting for the bread joke.
No, there's no bread joke.
I was waiting for the bread joke.
His name happens to be Mr. Warburton's.
I know he's been training down at Hovis. He's had a great camp. Not at all. And talking of, obviously earlier you were talking about Sage Northcutt and that kind of like very attractive, kind of stereotypically attractive male. Drew Doba is fighting Brad Riddell. Prath, I know you're pretty damn high on these two gentlemen. Tell me, what are you looking for in this fight?
I just got to say that
sorry, George.
You're right there, George.
Fucking war. That's what it would be. War. These two ain't fucking about.
I got to say, I quite fancy Drew Doba.
He is very attractive.
He is
chiseled. I've actually got a jaw under this beard, but he is chiseled.
I got to say. I mean, if I'm developing one, him and Alan Joe Ban could take a seat in there any day of the week. But yeah, not to name any names here. But I mean, I actually really like Drew Doba's style, man. And before the Islam Makhachev fight, I actually thought he had a really good chance against him. I thought that, his defensive wrestling seemed like it was pretty great in the fights that he had before that. I know that I'm pretty sure he beat Beneil Dariush.
And he didn't do terribly.
No, he lost it. He lost to Beneil Dariush. But he's had a couple of TKO wins. Alexander Hernandez, Nasrat Hakparast, who's quite highly rated in these divisions as well. So I actually really rate him, and he's had a lot of TKO wins as well, which is another thing that I really like because he's aggressive, super aggressive, comes forward, and he's in a firefight. And that's exactly what you're going to see out of him. That's exactly what you're going to see out of Brad Riddell as well. Brad Riddell has not been in a boring fight in the UFC yet, and I'll stand my ground on that. They've gone to decision, every single one of them, but they've been so entertaining. He is such a, I mean, he's just a savage in there, man. He's constantly moving forward. He doesn't seem to tire in any way, shape, or form. Him against Jamie Mullarkey, where they're both on their knees, like trading punches right at the end of the fight. Like, these two won't give up, and this is going to be a firefight, man. I don't anticipate any wrestling, unless it's Drew Doba trying to wrestle Brad Riddell, because I know Drew Doba does have a background in wrestling. But man, these two are going to stand in the middle and they're going to trade hammers at each other. So this is probably my fight of the night. I think this is probably going to be the best fight on this card. You know, and saying that, we've got Leon Edwards and Nate Diaz, Davison and Brandon Moreno, which I think is going to be the close second fight of the night. I think Drew Doba versus Brad Riddell for me is going to be the fight of the night. These two are going to put on an absolute show. And, you know, Brad Riddell has a real good chance here to become a little bit more higher ranked in the division. I know Drew Doba sits at not just high in the people's rankings, but obviously in the UFC rankings, but I think people really rate Drew Doba quite highly now, especially having the courage to take on someone like Islam Makhachev that everyone else is turning down at the moment. Nobody wants to fight Islam, and Drew Doba went in there and did what he could against someone who's just relentless as hell. And that is what Islam Makhachev is. So I think Islam Makhachev against anyone in this division is going to be an absolute problem. But Drew Doba does really, really well post Islam Makhachev, is what I'm going to say here. And I think he's going to be quite close to being at the top of the division in the next year or two. I think he's got a few small things to tighten up, some of his defensive wrestling, some of his mistakes on the feet as well that he made against Islam. But I think he comes from a good camp. I know he fights out of Elevation Team in Colorado, so he's got very smart people around him that are going to make great decisions for him and make him become a better fighter. And I think Brad Riddell is going to be a hefty test for him. So I think this is going to be a fun fight to watch. And it's at the end of the prelim, so you're going to go hyped as hell into the main card.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a good one. I like you say, I think there's definitely got fight the night potential, and there is some absolute crackers on this card, as we said. You know, this whole card, top to bottom, is very, very healthy.
Personally, I would flip Drew Doba and Brad Riddell to be the start of the main card and put Paul Craig and Jamar Hill as the prelim headliner, just because I think that's how much I rate the fight. And, you know, the UFC obviously like to make the first fight of the main card to be an absolute banger, which I do think Paul Craig versus Jamar Hill is going to be. But my God, Drew Doba versus Brad Riddell at that spot would have just been, I think that would have sealed the main card as being one of the best main cards in the last couple of years.
But then you've got to still keep that prelim quite healthy. You know, we obviously saw Dominic Cruz capping the prelims before. He's a big name as well. So I feel like the top of the prelims is actually a very big spot as well. It's almost it's its own main event.
Yeah.
And then we move on to a separate card that has its own main event. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of people catch it as well, just because a lot of people, as they're tuning in for the main card, they kind of a little bit early and they catch that kind of like top of the prelim fight. It's definitely a big spot, and it is like you boys have said, it's going to be an absolute barn burner. It's going to be a war between these two, and 100% $75,000 going into each of these boys' bank accounts on Sunday morning. I think it's definitely fight of the night.
I'm just thinking, right? When you book to go to a live UFC event, quite a lot of people just show up for the fights that they actually want to see. Like, quite a lot of people will just show up for the main event, for instance. And the main card, sorry, not the main event, the main card. You know, I've been to events before where it's like, you know, 10 o'clock at night, and then all of a sudden, like 1,000 people come in. You think, why were you not here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when I was watching the people that are, you know, when the camera's not even rolling? But do you think maybe they put a bigger name on the top of the prelims to get the people in to watch that, so that they're already sat down ready for when the main event starts, main card starts?
I think, you know, you kind of roll between those two, the headliner of the prelim and the start of the main card. I think generally speaking, you have to put two of your better fights on those two spots. I think they're two of the more important spots if you really want to grab the viewer. And going into a main card that is as stacked as this one is, you know, it doesn't, you know, now hindsight 2020, I'm sitting here reflective. that it's actually good for them to have Paul Craig versus Jamal Hill, because if Drew Doba versus Brad Riddell is that good and the rest of the card is the way that it is, no one's really going to give that much of a shit if Paul Craig versus Jamal Hill is okay. But I think it's going to be a decent fight. Not saying that it's not going to be a good fight.
No, for sure. George, what do you think about this fight then? Because Paul Craig's had a very up and down career, and obviously fighting out of Scotland and being very, very good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got a lot of finishes on his record as well. But
yeah,
Jamal Hill is going to be a very tough test for this gentleman, right? George, what do you think is going to play out of the weekend?
Okay, well, I'm actually going to back the British bloke, and I think Paul Craig's going to win this one at the weekend. I think that Paul Craig has actually found... I felt like Paul Craig, for a period of time, was unsure of himself in the UFC. Like, he almost doubted that he was good enough to be there. And I think the two kind of Shogun kind of fights have kind of confirmed to him that he is good enough to be there. He does deserve to kind of be ranked, in the top 15. And that, he can now kind of like think about progressing it forward and like where can he potentially go. And this is kind of the perfect fight because you've got another kind of like guy at the kind of same kind of area. There's a lot of hype about, Jamal Hill at the moment, 8-0. And, people are saying that this guy is a big problem at like, in that weight category. So I think that this is all set up quite nicely for Paul Craig. I don't think there's too much of a lose-lose situation here, to be honest. You've got a great opportunity to, take a lot of hype away from someone and take it for yourself. And, if you do lose, then, it's not, I don't think it's desperate. I don't think it's desperate if you were to lose on Saturday night to him. Because a lot of people go, well, this guy's super highly rated. And he's like the next coming of Jesus, in his division, I just think that, I don't think it's too bad for Paul Craig. But I'm excited for this one, though, man. Paul Craig, man, he's definitely found his home. Do you know what I mean? He's found that kind of like section of the UFC where he feels comfortable. And like you said, his jiu-jitsu is pretty damn high level, pretty damn good. So, yeah, I'm feeling pretty confident that Paul Craig gets this done on Saturday night and kicks off the main card with a British win.
Fingers crossed, man. Who was he fighting last time? Last time out, was it like Tajira or was it Olenink or something? Who was he?
Shogun, wasn't it?
He fought Shogun.
Shogun, that's
Yeah.
it. I knew it was one of the older. I knew it was one of the older generation.
Shogun, and he submitted him, didn't he?
Yes. He had him. Shogun was, cradled into baby position or baby pose or whatever it's called, just taking a lot of licks, and then he just sunk the choke, didn't he?
Yeah, man.
I think he tapped to strikes.
I think, yeah. It wasn't a submission.
Yeah.
It was tap to strikes.
Yeah, he tapped strikes. Yeah.
Mate,
Same position though. He was pounding him, and then he was like, "Yeah, I'm good here."
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that's what Paul Craig wanted. Because he is known as a submission artist, he wanted to get that kind of look. I can actually finish people on with the hands as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. Well, we'll see. He might finish Jamal Hill with hands this weekend, which would be pretty impressive. That would be pretty damn impressive.
And then someone else who is a submission expert next up on the card, Damien Meyer versus Balaam Mohammed. Balaam, remember the name Mohammed is obviously fighting the fight before the person that he lost to with a very severe eye poke. So it's a bit strange that they had these two gentlemen so close together. I'm not sure if there's any animosity still between the two of them because Leon obviously came out afterwards and said, I will not fight you again. I didn't want to fight you last time. They made me fight you. You're not worthy. In a roundabout way. But Damien Meyer's obviously most certainly on the back end of his career, right? And Balaam, remember the name Mohammed is an up and comer. So what do you think is going to play out this weekend?
Oh man, this is a tough fight for my boy Damien. Damien Meyer, the godfather, if you will, of jiu-jitsu in MMA. Obviously not discounting Royce Gracie, who is probably the actual godfather of MMA, if you will, in general. But for me, for what it's worth, and for my own personal opinion, I think Damien is the best representation of jiu-jitsu in mixed martial arts, going out there constantly getting these submission wins, dominant submission wins, dominant positions in general, just displaying the beautiful art of jiu-jitsu and just look at the guy. He doesn't look physically intimidating, but he's still able to control these guys on the ground just purely off of technique. So always one of my favorites to watch. But he's fighting a killer. Balaam Mohammed, great hands, great takedowns. The last time he was in the octagon, we watched him like basically outpace the world. It felt like incredible pace he was able to put on. Oh my God, I can't remember who he fought. Apart from Leon Edwards, the one before that. Oh God, who was it? Diego Lima. He was able to basically just completely crush him bell to bell, and didn't really give him an opportunity to strike at all, and just overwhelmed him. So I think if that gentleman comes out against Damien Meyer is going to have a very tough time holding Balaam Mohammed off in these situations. I think if he's able to get him down, I think Damien's got as good a chance as any at submitting anyone in the world, any weight, well, not at any weight class, but I think I give him a good chance to submit anyone on any given day at the weight class he chooses to be at. So yeah, man, it's going to be a tough fight, but I think probably Balaam Mohammed will probably be able to decision Damien Meyer. I think he's going to be able to just outpace him. He's a lot younger than Damien Meyer as well. And I think, yeah, definitely getting towards the end of Damien Meyer's career. His last win was over Ben Askren. Then obviously he fought Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns was able to TKO him to a victory and then go off to fight for the title and things like that. So, this is a high stakes fight for someone like Balaam Mohammed, former title challenger, all of these things, a win over a legend in the sport as well. I think people really rate Damien Meyer as one of the best in the, of all time in jiu-jitsu, and from that perspective, and that's in that sense. So I think people will really rate Balaam Mohammed for getting this win. I don't know how much this really does for Damien Meyer, because I know the fact that he is getting towards the end of his career. So I would love to see him fight, the older statesman of the welterweight division. But I don't know who that really looks like anymore, because they're all such killers now, like Diego Sanchez or something like that. But do you really want to see Diego Sanchez fight? No. I don't even really want to see Damien Meyer fight, to be fair. I think that last fight where he just got brutalized by Gilbert Burns as well just kind of put me off the idea of it. And he's a legend. I don't want to see him just take mad damage for no reason, So
yeah, I think it's time to hang the gi up, isn't it?
Yes, good reference.
It really is time to hang the gi up. And obviously, just a little sidetrack here. Obviously, with George, you put in the group chat earlier that Alistair Overeem is moving to Glory.
Yes.
What is going on here? The Matt, fair enough, he was on his one last run, but when you finish your one last run, that's it. Go and retire. Sail off into the sunset, train some kids. I don't know. Do something with your life. Anyway, we won't stay on that too
money.
I know. But you'd think 25 years in the game, spanning 4 decades or whatever it was that he's been fighting,
there's a couple of good fights for him in kickboxing, I will say. Rico Verhoeven would be a great fight. Badr Hari, he has fights where he can actually make a lot of money and bring prominence to Glory, because I think Glory don't get enough credit. That people complain in the UFC about them, or he's just taking him down and holding him down. Go watch kickboxing then. Kickboxing, you don't get that. So I don't understand why kickboxing isn't as popular as it is. And I'm hoping someone like Alistair Overeem can come in and get a couple of pay-per-view views and get people to tune in to watch these killers go at it. Like you look at like Giga Chikadze, Israel Adesanya. These are 2 guys that have come from Glory Kickboxing and have spent, the majority of their years formulating themselves in these organizations.
And there are some absolute killers in Glory at the moment. Cedric Doombay is probably the best example. At welterweight, the guy is an absolute animal. A lot of people might not know who he is, or they might do, but he's an absolute superstar in kickboxing, and potentially he's mentioned about transferring over to MMA at some point, potentially, and he is pretty unbelievable. I think he's got a record of something like 91-5 in his career in kickboxing, which is pretty insane. So yeah, the thing that's surprising about the Overeem thing, though, just quickly I think it's a free fight deal. So I'm surprised that they've given him 3 fights. That's quite a few for his age. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how he gets on. But I agree. Things like Badr Hari, I get it. It would bring in numbers. It would bring in views. So yeah, I understand why Glory have done it, but for Overeem himself, it did feel maybe it was time to kind of walk away. But the guy's addicted to the game, isn't he? He can't get away from it. You know, he wants to keep on going. So here he is.
Exactly. And another person who's not necessarily addicted to the game, but he comes back when he wants to. He leaves when he wants to. He comes back when he wants to. He fights for the money. George, I know you are literally...
I'm so excited for this. I'm
squealing like a little girl at this fight, right? Leon Rocky Edwards versus Nate Diaz. Now, Nate Diaz has probably fought like 3 times in the past 6 years, I think. It's not a lot. He hasn't fought a great amount of times. Leon Rocky Edwards has probably fought about the same amount of times because of his COVID and various different injuries and stuff like that. George, how do you think this plays out at the weekend? And what does this do for the stock of Nate Diaz? And what does it obviously do for the stock of Leon Edwards? Because theoretically, if you're beating someone so far behind you in the rankings, should it propel you forward? As we all know, the ranking system is completely stardust anyway. So, George, tell me, what do you think happens at the weekend? Do you think, one, why have they made this a 5-round fight? For what? That's because Nate Diaz wanted it. But George, tell me, what's your 2 cents on this fight?
Yeah, well, they made it a 5-round fight because Nate Diaz is going to try and get Leon Edwards past the first 3 rounds, and he'll think that if he can slow him down, that he's got a good chance of potentially catching Leon Edwards in 4 and 5. That's what he'll say. My theory on it is that he won't even see round 4. I think Leon Edwards will damage him so heavily inside 15 minutes that he doesn't actually see it. But I absolutely get why Nate Diaz wanted 5 rounds, because I think it is true that Leon Edwards has slowed down in the past. And he'll view this a bit like the Conor McGregor fight, probably. He'll probably think if he can see it through the first kind of 15 minutes, that the potential of tiredness might bring in his jiu-jitsu game, and he might end up, finding a way to submit Leon Edwards. But look, the reason why this fight for me is exciting is because there aren't many, if you're being really honest, the rankings are whatever. There aren't many genuine superstars in this sport. And whatever you think of Nate Diaz, he is a superstar. Like, he is unmissable TV. And Leon Edwards has finally got the opportunity against someone who the American audience are obsessed with, to go out there on Saturday night and potentially completely destroy him. And then at that point, he can then stand in the middle of the cage and go, I've just destroyed your guy, the guy that you all think is the best thing since sliced bread, the guy that you all love. I've completely annihilated him. Now, come on, stop pissing around now. It's my turn to fight Kamaru Usman. And the reason why I said it earlier on about Nate Diaz, the reason Nate Diaz is obviously he's getting paid for this. He's getting paid big time for this, but he's doing this because he wants to create more of a legacy. That's what I believe. I think he's in this for a title shot. I genuinely believe he's in this for a title shot. He knows that if on Saturday night he beats Leon Edwards, he knows he's fighting Kamaru Usman for the title. 100% the UFC are booking that. There's no way. I reckon they'll even push Colby Covington aside to make it happen. 100%. I genuinely think if he beats Leon Edwards, whether that's in whatever way, they will book him in a title fight against Kamaru Usman before the end of this year.
Of which Kamaru Usman will completely destroy him, like he has done his past 13 opponents in a row.
Kamaru Usman will want to take that fight as well, especially if he finishes Leon Edwards. Kamaru Usman will push for that fight, push Colby aside and be like, well, I already beat you, so go away. And he'll want to fight Nate Diaz. And I agree, by the end of the year.
This is way more damaging for Leon Edwards, potentially, because if Leon Edwards was to lose to Nate Diaz, he finds himself well out of picture. No, I don't think he will. I genuinely think that Leon Edwards is going to win this one, and he's going to win this in pretty emphatic style, because I think the all-round kind of skill set that Leon Edwards now possesses, a guy who feels like he's at the peak of his powers, although he hasn't been inside the octagon for the last couple of years. He's at that point now where I think as well, and the kind of, Nate Diaz is going to cut pretty easily, and Leon Edwards is going to find holes for that kind of sniper-like precision that he has, and especially in the clinch as well with those elbows. they're literally like knives. They're like razor blades, and all that scar tissue is going to be a massive problem for him, and it's going to end up bleeding. It wouldn't surprise me if at the end of round 3, Nate Diaz is bleeding like hell, and the doctor comes in and goes, "Nah, this is it now. No more of this." That wouldn't surprise me one bit either. But I think Nate Diaz is just banking on getting through 15 minutes, letting Leon make himself tired, and then potentially finding some way to win. Do I think he sees past round 3? I don't. I think Leon Edwards gets this done inside 15 minutes. I think it's actually now Leon Edwards finally gets the chance to show everybody how good he is. This is the stage he's been asking for. It's his opportunity. It is the ultimate opportunity. If you go and destroy Nate Diaz and you get on the microphone and say, "I want Kamaru's man," the UFC are going to find it so hard. They're going to find it so hard now. You're backing the UFC into a corner at that point. You're backing Dana White into a corner where saying, "Well, what I beat the guy that you wanted to put in a title fight." That's what Dana probably wants, Nate Diaz in a title fight. I've beaten him, so my win streaks are incredible, and now it's my time to fight for the title. He finally gets his opportunity on the big stage. Finally.
Surely Wonderboy should be fighting for the title next, man.
Well, that's a great question, because actually I don't disagree with you. I think if Wonderboy goes and beats Gilbert Burns on July 10th, then of course that is, and Kamaru Usman against Wonderboy is a great fight. That is a fantastic fight. So there are lots of options for the UFC, because obviously you can go down the Colby route. That will sell numbers because of the whole kind of, personal thing. Obviously, if Nate Diaz does find a way to win, that's an easy sell for the UFC. If Leon Edwards does destroy Nate Diaz, and I suppose there'll be the argument for that fight. And if Wonderboy wins, of course, there are loads of options at that weight category over the next few months. So it's not a sure thing for Leon Edwards, but certainly beating Nate Diaz on Saturday will go a long way to helping your title cause.
Yeah, I completely agree. And fingers crossed it is the banger that we all hope it's going to be, and it's not just going to be 5 rounds of everyone being put to sleep. But these two guys notoriously put on a show, especially Nate Diaz. He might do what his brother did to Anderson Silva and just lay down and then, do the little thing on the mat and then get up. These two guys are. I feel like if they'd have come along about 5-8 years later, they would be a lot bigger than they are, just with like their ring antics and how they fight and their like charisma and stuff like that. I feel like they were too early to catch that train. They could have been the Conor McGregor of this kind of time and been that kind of like, when someone said, "Oh, does having a kid change you being a fighter?" And he was like, "Why are you asking me stupid questions? Next." And he's a man after my own heart, to be fair. I wouldn't answer these kind of questions either.
They've never changed, the Diaz brothers. They're still just the same guys they are now. And that's why I think that's why I think he lives up to his name of being a bit of a gangster in this fight. Like I said, he could have taken anyone. The UFC would have given him anybody, but he chose Leon Edwards. Like, that is
respect.
You are a bad motherfucker. Like, basically, to think that you can get inside there and genuinely think that you can beat him, like, fair play, man. Respect to Nate Diaz.
Yeah. No, I think this is going to be a good fight. And then after that, we've obviously got the rematch that we've been waiting such a long time for. I feel like we've been waiting 6 months for this. I think we have.
We have.
Obviously Figueiredo versus Moreno, and they had an electric first fight. The unfortunate things were the consistent fouls from Figueiredo. I believe that it was that got the point taken away, which obviously sent the whole fight into a draw, which if you'd have put money on would have given you a huge return. I think it was 80-1 for a draw on that fight. And as soon as that point got taken away, we all knew, because it was such a close fight. I felt like these two little men, they've got the quickest hands in the world. It was like you had to watch it on half speed because they were just going. Moreno has got that heart, that true Mexican Canelo kind of heart, where he was just taking everything and fighting his way through it. Yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to this one. I always say that I'm a fan of fighting and not fighters, but these two gentlemen are definitely bringing light to their division. How How do you think this goes down at the weekend? Quite a lot of people would have said it was 3-2 for Figueiredo in the first fight. Obviously, with the point being taken away, it took him to a draw. But do you think it's going to go very much the same way, or do you think Moreno is going to come back with a fire lit under his arse?
I think it's going to be a great fight again. I don't anticipate these guys coming in and having a measured tactical approach. I think they're just going to swing like they did the first time. Incredible fight. I did have Davison winning, and obviously with the point deduction, taking it to a draw. I think Brandon Moreno's got crazy heart. I think he is just such a durable fighter. And he was a former training partner, I don't know if you guys know this, of Henry Cejudo. So, he's been in there with someone who is elite as hell. And so I wasn't unsurprised that Brandon Moreno was able to have the performance he did in that first fight, because I know he is a tough guy. And I know that he, generally speaking, is well-rounded everywhere. I think at 125, you have to be well-rounded everywhere. You can't have poor stand-up because the guys are so fast. You can't be bad on the ground because everybody's a black belt. Like, you have to be high level everywhere, and Brandon Moreno is the epitome of that. And I think Davison Figueiredo again is the epitome of that in that division as well. So I think these two guys are going to be sitting quite comfortably near the top of the division for a while, regardless of the result here, because I think people are going to have a very, very tough time with the power of Davison Figueiredo. And I think people are going to have a problem with being able to put someone like Brandon Moreno away and to deal with the stand-up as well, because I think he's very, very sneaky good stand-up as well. So I think it's going to be a tough fight. I think Davison Figueiredo should probably win here. I think, it felt like most of the shots that he was hitting Brandon Moreno was hurting him. And I don't think Brandon Moreno was able to put the pop on the punches that was really phasing Figueiredo too much. One or two occasions here and there, but like Davison for the most part was very composed through that fight. So it's going to be an interesting one, I've got to say. I do love both of these guys as well. So I hate to see a loser here in any way, shape, or form, because I think I love the story of both guys. Obviously, like Davison Figueiredo now is become a favorite of ours on this channel because of his story and his background and how just crazy his character is as a person. And for him to win, kind of like Charlie Olives as well, in that same sense, that just like that amazing Brazilian spirit, I think that we can really, really align ourselves with. And so I feel like Figgy is going to rule here for a good while. I respect the hell out of the flyweights, but I think Figueiredo has just got so much power. He's so composed. He's got great shot selection. He goes in, he doesn't overthrow shots. He doesn't throw too much. He's throwing the perfect amount of shots to hurt someone, to put him away. Look at the way he finished Joe Benavidez. So tactical, so surgical. Every single shot he was hitting Joe with was hurting him. And so I think everybody in flyweight, I think if bantamweights were going down to flyweight, I think they would have trouble with Davison Figueiredo as well. I'm really interested to see when Davison Figueiredo gets to the point where he does move up to bantamweight, being a smaller guy, but I think putting on a little bit extra muscle. I think he's going to be interesting at bantamweight. So yeah, I'm very, very excited for this fight, and I think Davison's probably going to edge this again by decision, but it's going to be a crazy fight. Second fight of the night underneath Drew Doba and Brad Riddell.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
That's all we can say. That's all we can hope for, isn't it? With this kind of card of this magnitude, that fingers crossed.
And they both know each other now. They both know each other now as well. They both know the power. Brandon Moreno knows what power shots to expect. Davison Figueiredo is now going to know a little bit more about the tactical style of Brandon Moreno. So I think, these guys are going to be able to adjust off of each other. They both come from great camps as well. So we're going to see an outrageous fight here.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, I don't think we've ever had because usually when you have more than one fight and you get into that like trilogy realm, that we've never had a draw and then they're having another fight. And then obviously there's that. Anything either the two of you can think of the top of your head, a draw in a championship fight?
Yeah, Woodley Wonderboy, wasn't it? Wasn't that a draw the first time? They went back and fought again.
Only twice though, right? Not a trilogy.
Not a trilogy. They only fought twice, didn't they? Because then Woodley beat him. But I can't think of a trilogy. This is the only time I can think of where there's been a draw and then they have had the second fight. Obviously, there was Woodley Wonderboy, and then they didn't have a third, but they might not have a third fight after this Saturday, though, these two.
Yeah, true.
You know,
And
one of them.
technically, Davison won, but he just had the point taken away. I think he
Yeah.
needs to tighten that stuff up as well. That's just, it's not on.
It was lots of thumbs in the eyes on the ground, wasn't it?
Figgy's saying as well. Figgy's saying he's going to knock him out in round 1.
Well, he
That's
couldn't,
what he
said.
he couldn't knock him out in 5 rounds last time, so why is he going to do it in 1 this time?
I don't know. I think I agree. I think Figgy wins this on points.
Yeah.
And then before the end of the year, my guy Askar Askarov gets himself a title fight.
Say again, sorry.
Askar Askarov.
No, sorry. What did you say?
Oh, what did I say? I said
it's because he's deaf. It's a joke, man. It's because he's deaf. Although the commentator said he's completely deaf, he's only 70% and 30%. But yeah, it was just a deaf joke, man.
Yeah,
You got to listen out for these.
No, stop it. Right, move on to the main event.
The main event needs no introduction. We've got Israel, the last style bender, Adesanya versus Marvin Vettori. Now, I'll let you into a little story of mine, right? A couple of years ago, I said to a very good friend of mine, a boxing casual, an MMA casual, a boxing hardcore, I texted him and said, look, this guy, Israel Adesanya, spelt his name terribly, naturally, like we all did when Izzy was fighting on the prelims. And I said, this guy's the next big thing. What?
Yeah, I'm known for my spelling. I'm known for my eloquence.
But I messaged my friend and said, this guy, Israel Adesanya, and I probably put 3 Y's and 4 A's in Adesanya. And here he is. This guy is, he's been a very, very good fighter to watch if you are coming into the sport of MMA, because he's just, so charismatic the way he fights. And he's definitely in my all-time favorite list, which is very rare, very, very rare. I always like to watch this gentleman fight, and he always puts on a good show. But I feel like after the Jan Blachowicz fight, where it was a very wrestling heavy base and obviously got taken down quite a few times, Marvin Vettori is built like a brick shithouse. And I feel like he's definitely going to try and do the same thing and go for that same blueprint that Jan Blachowicz went for, because that's his route to victory. Is it going to be a 5-round banger and a 5-round slugfest? Probably not. If Marvin Vettori can have his way, it will be a 5-round grinding, lots of cage work, lots of, single legs, move to a double, clasp the hands, very similar to who did it at the weekend? Delidze? Was it Delidze at the weekend that was just back hugging for 3 rounds? But at the end of the day, getting the W is getting the W. George, what do you think about this fight? And do you think that over the past couple of weeks, obviously with what happened over at City Kickboxing and taking a loss as well, is his first loss, I believe. Do you think he's going to come into this fight as a different person, or do you think he's going to come into it as his usual self?
I don't see any other way but his usual self. I think that's just Izzy is always in that kind of mindset. That kind of, he's got a bit of banter. He always seems to be pretty relaxed during fight week. And I just think he'll have the same. I mean, there is that obviously sad news, obviously out of City Kickboxing with Foul Vake, and obviously, what has happened is obviously terrible, and it is a kind of a scenario which can go one of 2 ways. Obviously you can get there and the cage door can lock and you can just not really show up and you can have a bit of an off night, and no one would really, have a go at you or complain if you said, look, I've just been really struggling these last few weeks. I haven't really had my head right. It's been a bit of a blur, but I still think that Izzy will come up the other way. I still imagine him to come out a bit like a superhuman and put on a bit of a spectacle, to be honest. I think the thing is, though, with Marvin Vettori is that Marvin Vettori obviously will look to wrestle. Obviously, that's clearly the path to victory. That's, he's not going to stand on the feet with him and trade. He's not. And he's, I think that he would be wise to spend a lot of time with someone inside his own camp who actually pushed Adesanya so hard, which was Kelvin Gastelum. You know, it's a very different thing, though. I think, though, when I was thinking about the Gastelum thing today, and obviously Vettori might have learned from him, you know, from ahead of that fight with Adesanya this weekend. You know, the thing that I take away from it, though, having like when I kind of watched a little bit back of it today, was I think Izzy is such a different fighter than he was back then. Mm-hmm. He was a bit more willing to kind of stand and trade. While now I feel like he's developed this kind of a bit more of an elusive kind of game, you know, that he likes to play with these kind of like heavier, more wrestler type, you know, fighters. I think, I just think that this will kind of go the similar kind of way, in the sense that he'll you know, get in and out. You know, he'll be that sniper that he always is, and he'll frustrate Vettori. And I think the biggest thing, though, is that Vettori is very durable, and because he's so durable, it's unlikely that Adesanya finishes Vettori. I think this probably does go all 5 rounds, but it wouldn't surprise me if Adesanya wins 4, maybe even 5 rounds. That wouldn't surprise me. I think Adesanya kind of sees this through pretty. I don't want to use the word comfortable, but I think he finds a game plan to kind of nullify what Vettori wants to bring, and that's kind of the takedowns. And what people forget as well is that Izzy's takedown defense in his own weight category is actually super, super good. It's really, really high. Yeah. You know, when he fought Blachowicz, you know, Adesanya came in obviously what you would consider underweight for light heavyweight, and obviously Blachowicz ballooned right up, and that huge weight difference that night played a huge part in when he got taken down, him not being able to get back up again. You know, both these guys will kind of enter inside the octagon around the same kind of weight, so there is less of that kind of weight kind of advantage, shall we say, you know, if he was to get him down. But his takedown defense is very good, which I think people have forgotten about since the Blachowicz fight. But yeah, I think Izzy puts on another spectacle. I think that's the bottom line. He always does, doesn't he? He is a superstar. You know, he's a rare breed, and like you said, Connor, he's going to end up being I still think he's going to end up being one of the greatest fighters that we've seen in MMA.
Yeah, no, I think both these gentlemen are coming to put on a show, and obviously they've had a fight before. I'm not sure what the statistics are when you win the first fight, whether your percentage is higher or lower to winning the second fight. I'm not sure what the statistics are. I think I actually remember one of the commentators mentioning it before, but George, do you know?
I don't know, but all I was going to say about the first fight though was that I don't think it was as close as people made it out to be. I thought Adesanya won it. When Vettori had the 2 takedowns in the 3rd round, he did nothing with the takedowns. He just kind of laid on top of him. There was no work after the takedowns. It was just, you know. So for me, I think Vettori and his performances have been very, very impressive in the last few fights. He's what he's good at, he's used to his biggest advantage. But there's using it against the Kevin Holland who cannot wrestle, you know, or have any takedown defense, and then there's trying to do it against an Adesanya. And I think there's levels to the game, as they say, and this is the ultimate level, you know. And we'll find out if Vettori can stack up on Saturday.
Yeah, Prath, did you manage to get any information on the statistic?
Nope.
No,
not something you can simply Google, unfortunately.
Yeah, it isn't. I'm sure I remember either John Anik saying it, or Brendan Fitzgerald, or one of these kind of guys that mentioned about the Conor McGregor Dustin fight and the chances of winning the second one, and then going on to win the trilogy, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. They just got into my head.
I would say that we don't see a hell of a lot of trilogy fights. As far as I can remember in the UFC, I distinctly remember most of them either being 1 or 2 fights. So as far as I can remember, I don't know the actual number, but I would say that most of these fights end up just having 2 fights, and then that's that.
Yeah. I mean, what happens? So, Prath, obviously, if Izzy comes out the victor here at the weekend, what's left for him at 185? Because there's not a great amount going around in the division, right? Because he's beaten most of them, unless he wants to fight Darren Till, but that would be a wild matchup, I think.
I think Darren Till is pretty much the only one he hasn't beaten out of all these guys.
And in there.
Cannonier as well, but again, Jared Cannonier needs to get same with Darren Till. Jared Cannonier and Darren Till need to get a couple of wins together to fight for the title. Like, I'm sure Israel wants to fight these guys, but these guys aren't getting themselves into positions where they're fighting for a title because they're losing the key fights. But Nate Diaz makes an S load of money compared to Jared Cannonier, right? On pay-per-view. If
Darren Till makes a good amount of money.
I would say Darren Till was a good one. I think if Till wins one fight, he's fighting. He could fight Israel Adesanya. You know, regardless of where his number is on the rankings, they're going to give him a big fight. They're going to give him a Paulo Costa. They're going to give him I think he's fighting Jared Cannonier, right? No, he's fighting Derek Brunson, who's number 5. So you know, he's putting himself within the top 5 to then potentially fight for a title. You know, I think at this point, Israel is really dictating who he fights for the championship. Because I think, you know, he wanted to fight Yoel Romero. He fought Yoel Romero. I'm sure he was the one who decided he wanted to fight Jan Blachowicz. He went up and fought Jan Blachowicz. So I think at the end of the day, I think Izzy chooses who he fights for, the title. I think Marvin was a bit of a no-brainer because of the wins he's had, the people that he's beaten. It's a rematch, split decision, but obviously it was Izzy won that fight. I don't understand how that fight could have been a split decision. I think that one referee was smoking something else. I mean, what a surprise. What a surprise. One of the idiots made a terrible decision. And so I think Israel's the type of fighter that learns from his mistakes. I think Israel's the type of fighter to really hone in on the things that he had apparent holes in, look back on them, become better fighters for that. Now, I will say that I got to say that obviously the death of his friend is obviously going to impact him emotionally, but I also see him as someone that's had, you know, hundreds of kickboxing fights. I think he's able at this point to separate himself from the person in the cage to who he is as a person outside of the cage. And I think he goes in with that cold-blooded attitude, that same cocky style that we're so used to watching. And I think he goes in and really, really gives work to Marvin Vettori. I think he as well, you know, he should have the confidence of winning that first fight. So I think he's felt him physically, you know, in the takedowns. I think Israel Adesanya has got to get those underhooks ready to go at all times. He's gonna be pushed into that cage as much as possible in the single leg position, in the double leg position. I think as long as he's got a good break for the body lock against the cage and the single leg and double leg, I think he's pretty solid and sweet here. And I think what you'll probably end up seeing is kind of reminiscent of Carla Esparza versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk, when Carla Esparza just constantly trying to take Joanna Jędrzejczyk down, and Joanna defending the takedowns and just tuning her up as every time she got up. And I think that's kind of what you're going to see here. He's going to be able to defend these takedowns quite readily, and then he's going to hit him with 2, 3, 4 punch combinations that's really going to sting him. He's going to be able to maybe put him away, but I think he's either going to be able to put him away or at least go to a very strong decision this time around.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like we say, as long as it's a banger, as long as it's memorable, that's what we really want, isn't it? I feel like Michael Page for Bellator is what they wanted Michael Page to be the Israel Adesanya of Bellator, whereas he's nowhere near. And Israel Adesanya is just, you know, a very, very standout performer. Did you get my reference there? Like similar kind of charismatic styles.
Yeah,
man. I think it will be a banger, to be fair, because I don't think either of these guys, I don't think Vettori's going to allow it to, you know.
I think Vettori is very much going to allow it to. He's going to very much try and hug him against the cage for 5 rounds. I think Izzy is going to have to do his best to circle off of that cage, stay within the 2 black lines of the octagon, and use the center of the cage to try and force. At least if Marvin's going to try and take him down, he's trying to take him down an open mat where he has a greater chance of defending the takedown because you have all of his hips available to push him down.
And this will be isn't in the Apex, so it'll be a 35 instead of a 25.
In front of the fans, which I think is also another thing that leans in Adesanya's favor because he likes to pay up to the crowd. I think the crowd are very much going to be booing Marvin Vettori, and I think Israel is going to play that up and know that the crowd are behind him and against Marvin. I think that as the fight goes on, that's going to break Marvin down as an extra layer as the fight as it goes along.
Well, maybe in the end, Adesanya forces Vettori to partake and stand up for a while, and that won't work out very nice.
But you never know. Marvin Vettori might knock him out. You just do not know what is going to happen, and that is why we love this sport.
Oh.
It really,
Strange things happen.
It really, really is. And if you've made it to the end of the episode, thank you very much. It was a long one. We digressed. We went off track. We went off the beaten track quite a number of times, as we like to do on this show. And with a card that we have ahead of us this weekend, it was hard not to talk about every single fight that was on there, because it is banger after banger. And fingers crossed, that is what they deliver. And hopefully, as we've said throughout this episode, that everyone makes weight, we get no freak injuries, and Chris Lee isn't judging, or Camacho, whatever his name is. Let's just hope that it doesn't go. Let's just hope that every fight is a finish, so we do not need to see the judges.
And let's hope as well that Mark Smith isn't refereeing Leon Edwards' fight, because something will go terribly wrong for Leon Edwards if that is.
He gets no breaks, that man. No breaks at all. Honestly, he is at the butt of every judge, it would seem, in every fight. But nevertheless, thank you very much for joining in to the Fight and Talk 2 channel. We are the Fight and Talk 2 team. If you would like to get some merch, George is sporting the Fight and Talk 2 t-shirt. Prath has got a Fight and Talk 2 beanie. Not we need it in central London at the moment when it's 26 degrees. I think that would be a very, very silly decision to put one of them on unless you're cutting weight for an upcoming fight. But
if you're in Australia and it's really cold there, perfect purchase.
Perfect purchase, exactly. We will be breaking down this card on Sunday evening, ready for Monday morning, I assume, or Monday night time. We usually get the show out. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time. Prath, George, myself, we all appreciate it. Peace.